Well, away from the Mid-Eastern crisis, now President Bola Tinubu has signed the 2026 appropriation bill into law, approving a total expenditure of 68.32 trillion naira for the fiscal year. President also assented to a separate bill extending the implementation of the capital component of the 2025 budget from March 31st to June 30 to ensure the completion of ongoing projects. In a statement, presidential spokesperson Mr. Bayo Ononuga said the 2026 budget includes a 4.7 trillion naira for statutory transfers, 15.8 trillion naira earmarked for debt servicing. Fiscal framework further allocates 15.4 trillion naira to recurrent expenditure. 32.2 trillion naira is designated for capital projects under the development fund. According to the president, the budget reflects the administration's commitment to economic stability, strengthening national security, and inclusive growth. With implementation effective from April 1st, the federal government is expected to commence full rollout immediately. President Tinubu also commended the National Assembly for swift passage of the bill, reaffirming his administration's focus on fiscal reforms, enhanced revenue mobilization, job creation, and expanded social protection. Well, my guest for us to understand the 2026 spending plan as assented to by President Bola Tinubu is a special advisor on economic affairs to the President, Office of the Vice President, Dr. Tope Fasua. Dr. Fasua, good evening and thank you so much for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you very much, and good evening to you. Sorry, I'm having to join from inside the car because I'm on the road.
All right, then. But let's go through this figure. 68.32 trillion naira is what we are looking at here. Looking at the statutory transfer, debt servicing, that's at 15.8 trillion allocated for that. What do you make of the total plan in its entirety before we look at some specifics like sectoral allocations and all?
Right. Okay. Though the channel is a bit unclear, but yes, we're talking about the newly signed 2026 budget, which is 68 trillion. I think what we need to note, of course, the right sectors have been emphasized: security, infrastructure, very importantly, of course, things like education, health are also emphasized. But I think the big emphasis this time is on infrastructure, and more than 50% of that budget is entirely on capital. It used to be that in times past we would struggle with 30% capital, 70% recurrent. I think we have to say kudos to Mr. President for ensuring that shift towards capital spending now. And that's very, very significant. And of course, we also have seen a leap in the budget, at least in Naira terms, to 68 trillion.
Yeah.
Coming from the 50 trillion angle. And I say why not? Because Nigeria does need larger budgets. We have a lot of mouths to take care of. We have a huge infrastructure gap to take care of. We have security challenges that we need to tackle. So rather than kicking the can down the road, Mr. President is tackling these challenges head on. And I think we have to say kudos to that. So this is a fantastic budget. We want to see more of that. And of course, on the revenue side, which is always where people will complain,
exactly.
We know that our challenge is the revenue. However, that's the reason why we have put in place the tax reforms, which have also kicked in. So right now, even in this newly signed budget, there are higher expectations from the collections of FRS and also the customs, which have fed into the numbers. So the revenue expectation is no longer 34 trillion. It has approached the 40 trillion range. And I'd say, why not? Because with the kind of reforms that have been done, a lot of what has escaped into the informal sector will be able to make it into government coffers, and we can do better for ourselves.
All right, then I wanted to ask you about the revenue, but you hit that. But almost half of this budget now is for capital expenditure, 32.2 trillion. What should Nigerians expect in 1 minute?
Right, I think for markets, it's a positive development. Because the national budget is the most important document in a country in a given year. It gives the impetus for other sectors to know what to do, what to spend. That's the hugest numbers. I don't think there's any company, whether bank or not, that can talk of 68 trillion in this country. Maybe they've been nearing the 10 trillion, 20 trillion range, even some of the most profitable, the highest turnover companies. But that's why the government budget is very, very important and very central. So I think we should see a positive development in the market, especially the stock market. which has done tremendously well this year. I think they have crossed the 160,000 all-share index mark, which is remarkable because remember that when Mr. President took over in May 2023, that number was 55,000. So the market has gone up about 300 or 400%. You know, and I also want people to think about what's going on at the subnational, because the reforms of Mr. President thus far has been very fantastic for the subnationals. I did a review the other time, found out, just looking at the budgets of subnationals, states like Enugu, like Abia, like Lagos, like Kano, they have been able to do, Enugu did about 1,400% over what they did in 2019. And some of the other ones, including Lagos, did 400%. And that's remarkable. In Naira, that means that people are thinking. And a lot more can be done. If you look at the debt scenario, of course, 93% of our debt is held by federal government, only 7% at the state level, which means that the states can do more. With the kind of cash flows they're getting now, they can do a whole lot more, and they can leverage a little bit more. I heard Professor Ken Ife speaking just now about the fact that, look, you know, we have a good balance sheet, a national balance sheet that's fantastic, debt to GDP of about 38%, you know, and the GDP keeps growing. Of course, we're back to number 3 in Africa. IMF and Co have done their reports on that. So it's a positive development for the market. It's a positive development for the people of Nigeria. We're having a higher, you know, per capita budget itself, and it's a visionary budget, and I think it's doable. All right,
Dr. Tope Fasua, Special Advisor on Economic Affairs to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Office of the Vice President. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, Precious, it's a whole lot.
A whole lot. Another budget cycle. Performance is what we're going to be analyzing.
Yeah, of course.
For the previous one in the coming days.
Yeah, then, we'll compare and contrast.
Revenue for this one as well. Thank you so much, Olu, as always. Great interviews.
All right.